ความสัมพันธ์ระหว่างไทยและสหรัฐเดินหน้ามาครบ183 ปีในขณะที่ไทยได้ชื่อว่าเป็นพันธมิตรที่เก่าแก่ประเทศหนึ่งในระดับภูมิภาคแต่ช่วงหลังอาจจะเกิดคำถามมากขึ้นถึงจุดยืนของประเทศสหรัฐอเมริกาต่อประเทศไทยโดยเฉพาะในช่วงเปลี่ยนผ่านทางการเมืองขณะที่ช่วงนี้เป็นช่วงของการรณรงค์หาเสียงเลือกตั้งในสหรัฐและเริ่มที่จะได้เห็นความชัดเจนมากขึ้นว่าใครจะได้เป็นตัวแทนของพรรคเดโมแครตและพรรครีพับลิกันในการชิงชัยตำแหน่งประธานาธิบดีในช่วงปลายปีอาจจะเกิดคำถามขึ้นมาเช่นเดียวกันว่าแล้วนโยบายการต่างประเทศของสหรัฐต่อระดับภูมิภาคและต่อไทยจะเปลี่ยนไปอย่างไรหรือไม่คืนนี้ตอบโจทย์ดิฉันมาที่บ้านของเอกอัครราชทูตสหรัฐอเมริกาประจำประเทศไทยท่านทูตกลิ่นทาวเซนเดวิสหลังจากที่ได้มารับตำแหน่งนี้ในประเทศไทยเกือบ9 เดือนเต็มถึงมุมมองเกี่ยวกับการเมืองไทยและการเลือกตั้งในสหรัฐค่ะAmbassador Glyn Davies, thank you very much for joining the program. With the worst mass shooting in the U.S. history, it happened in the Gay Pride Month.
Yes.
Must be quite ironic for the U.S. that actually you should have celebrating about it, but this time you have to be mourning about it.
Yes, it is very sad because typically this month, June, in America, and actually increasingly around the world, is a month to celebrate the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, LGBT community. And here comes this terrible tragedy in my country, in the United States, in Florida, which reminds us, in some respects, of the kinds of discrimination and pressure that the LGBT community is under.
So what actually has gone wrong with homosexual issue, or is it all about gun control policy?
Well, we will see as we investigate this case exactly what happened, what the motivations of this man were. We'll see to what extent there might be connections to international terrorism, or to what extent it's simply a hate crime. We don't know yet. We're trying to find that out. But we suspect that the fact that he targeted a nightclub that is attended mostly by the LGBT community, this would indicate that probably it had an aspect of a hate crime. So it is terribly tragic that it's occurred. Our hearts go out to all of the victims and their families. It's a terrible business.
But the question of having gun or buying gun so easily, it's also part of the equation.
Yes.
And people must be wondering
Yes.
why there are so many guns in the
Yes.
US.
So many guns in the US and so many tragedies like this. Now, America is a big country, 330 million people. So there is always crime, but this is a phenomenon, a circumstance that for us is very difficult and increasingly becoming a subject of public and political debate. And this occurs, this tragedy in Orlando, at a time when our campaign for the presidency of the United States is becoming more and more focused on. We have about 4 or 5 months left before the election. And so I suspect that what happened in Orlando will become part of the debate to some extent, and that gun control could well be a bigger issue in our politics because of it.
With the presumptive nominees of the two parties, now you know who they are, Hillary Clinton
Right.
from the Democrat Party
Right.
and Donald Trump. What would be the decisive issue in this US presidential election, do you think?
Yes.
Gun control, terrorism, same-sex issues?
Sure. I don't know that there will be a decisive issue. It's very difficult to tell. Our process of electing a president occurs over a long period of time. You know, the United States is the oldest continuously functioning democratic republic in the world. And so over 240 years, we've developed an elaborate and very lengthy process. And we're getting towards the end of it, but we still have until November, you see. It's a little too early to know because now that the two candidates have been decided, this now comes the really interesting part because now the two candidates will face off against each other more directly. The debate, the conversation, even the arguments will sharpen and clarify, and eventually we will have the most interesting aspect of all, I believe, which will be debates face to face between Hillary Clinton and Donald Trump. And that will help us to know what will be the main issues, how will they be defined, how will they be presented to the American people, and that will allow the American people to make their decision between the two.
Regarding the issue of Orlando shooting, the term radical Islam has become heated debate at the moment, even for President Obama and Donald Trump, and then Hillary Clinton also jumped in the debate. Why does it matter so much with this term, radical Islam in the US?
I don't know that it matters so much to many Americans, but I think in terms of this, this very heated political debate, this fight that's going on, it's become, for now, something that's being talked about because I think it's an issue that Mr. Trump appears to want to highlight. We'll see whether the Orlando case becomes a case that goes more in the direction of terrorism and Islamic fundamentalism or becomes more about gun control in the future. It's very difficult for us to know. But it is true that globally we all face this challenge of radicalized extremists. And we all need to work together in order to counter it, to deal with it, and to appeal to the vast majority of members of the Islamic faith, the 99% of Muslims who do not believe in this, who are peace-loving, and who subscribe to a religion that at its core is about people getting along.
Overall, do you think it's also timing for the US to review foreign policy toward the Middle East?
Well, I think what happens naturally every 4 years in America when there's a presidential campaign, and remember, we're not just electing a president, we're electing hundreds and hundreds of national level officials, senators and congressmen. We're electing representatives and senators for each of the legislatures of all 50 states. Thousands of elections will happen in the United States. But I think that this whole question of what will be the foreign policy orientation priorities of the United States, the Middle East is a big part of it, this comes into play. It's part of this national conversation that we have every 4 years when we choose our leaders. And it's a healthy thing. Even if from the outside it looks sometimes like it's a fight and people are arguing with each other, we do it peacefully, we do it through our democratic process, and the result will be that Americans will reach a consensus and elect a leader, elect a Congress, and we will go forward for the next 4 years under that mandate.
It's very crucial time and the whole world is watching. If a Thai friend of yours asks you who would be better for Thailand between Mrs. Hillary Clinton,
Yes.
Mr. Donald Trump,
Yes.
what would be your answer?
As a diplomat, I would not answer. It's not my job to play politics. And I don't think it's the right thing for me to do to get out ahead of the will of the American people. I think what's important, though, I would ask people not to focus too much on personalities, but to focus on process. For me, this is what's interesting about what happens in any democracy, and certainly in my own country. It's about the process. It's about the conversation. It's about the fact that at every level, every community, every state, every region, and at the level of the nation, we have a conversation and it goes on and on. It's very long and it goes in different directions. It's affected by the headlines, but it's all about the American people trying to decide what direction do they want the country to go in. Foreign policy, big part of it, economically, socially, all of these aspects are debated over and over and over again through the media, but also in living rooms, in town halls, all over our country. And the result of it is that we all feel we have had a chance to participate in this political process. And at the end, all Americans, almost all Americans, I'm sure, will accept the outcome and we will move on.
With Mrs. Clinton, we all know that she was former First Lady.
That's right.
And the U.S. Secretary of State, so
Yes.
she didn't have trouble with knowing Thailand.
Yes.
But with Mr. Donald Trump, do you think he knows Thailand?
I don't know much about his travel history. I'm not sure. I know from having met Hillary Clinton when I worked at the White House and then worked for her in the State Department when I was working on East Asian affairs, so I know her a bit better. I don't know Donald Trump, but you see, that's what's great about this process, because through this process, like any citizen of the United States, I can try to understand better what his position is and understand better what his views will be toward foreign policy, and in particular, Asia and Southeast Asia, which is, for me, what I care about the most. Thailand, the kingdom, the relationship between the United States of America and Thailand and its future. So I'm still as interested in this as everybody else. I want to know as well. So I'm listening.
But for your role as U.S. Ambassador to Thailand, if you have an opportunity to give a briefing to Mr. Trump, what would you like to tell him about Thailand?
I would. That's a great question. I would explain to him the history of the relationship, 9-10 generations of friendship that began back in 1818 between King Rama II and our President Monroe, that began not through war or colonialism or conquest or one side seeking advantage over another, but began when across great space and distance at the beginning of the 19th century, enlightened leaders here, Rama II, and an enlightened President of the United States, President Monroe, saw the opening, saw something important in each other and began to communicate, which turned into, 182 years ago, this treaty. The first treaty we had with any Asian nation of amity, still in force today, that began the special relationship between the kingdom and the United States that grew during the 20th century, after World War II especially, is still strong today and should be strong for the future. And that is what I would say to him. And I would talk about how we cooperate in so many areas: health, business relationship, security relationship, law enforcement, investment, on and on and on, and why Thailand matters, and why Thailand matters for Southeast Asia as one of the strongest economies here. You sit at the center of it. The future of Southeast Asia depends to a great extent on the decisions made here by governments of Thailand. And so I would tell him we need to keep that relationship strong and strengthen it even further in the future.
But for Thai people, we may not be sure what's the current relation between U.S. and Thailand. The partnership, friendship has carried on for 183 years.
Yes.
And the U.S. keeps saying that Thailand is good friend, good
Right.
old friend.
Right.
What's the
Right.
current situation between good old friends?
Oh, I think the fundamentals of our relationship are very solid. I'll give you a couple of examples. So yesterday I went and spoke with your health minister, and we talked about all of the ways that Thailand and the United States have been collaborating together for 3 generations, over 55 years, on issues like HIV/AIDS, on malaria, on Japanese encephalitis, now on Zika, for instance. Our researchers have worked together as equals, as collaborators on all of these problems, and they continue to do so today. And because of their work together, just the other day, the World Health Organization declared that for the first time here in Thailand, Thailand did this, the transmission of HIV/AIDS between mother and child has been ended. This is a triumph for Thailand, and it's part of this relationship that we've had together as counterparts and colleagues. And this goes on and on and on across many, many areas of cooperation, collaboration between us. Those fundamentals are sound. 7,000 Thai students in America at American universities. I could give you many, many examples. Those fundamentals remain sound. Because of the nature of the current political situation here, we still have some constraints to the relationship by law in the United States. Since an elected government was taken over by a military government, a junta, that doesn't change the fact that we cooperate. I am accredited to the current government here. I work with them, and we continue to work together. And we know that in the future, Thailand will be what Thailand has always been. Thailand will be strong, prosperous, free, and independent. And we know in the United States that for us, Thailand will always be important. So we will continue to work on that and strengthen that, because that day will come when you will be through your reform process, your referendum, you'll have elections, and a new day can come for the people of Thailand, and that will change, I think, a little bit, a very little bit, the nature of the relationship between the two countries in a good way.
But before looking forward to the future,
Right.
people must be wondering how would the two countries be developed from this point, especially critique. Say Washington has so many standards on the issue of democracy, on human rights, especially in the region, especially if you compare your stance on Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, and Thailand. Do you consider
Well,
your stand is different for Thailand?
What I would encourage people to do is to read the human rights reports that have been written on these nations, to look at what we've said about the human rights situations, the political situations elsewhere as well. But you know, the things that we're working on with the neighbors of Thailand are the same things we're working on here with Thailand. Things like the business relationships, things like the strategic relationship. We have a very strong and important military-to-military relationship. The largest multilateral military exercise in Asia occurs here in Thailand, and it's co-hosted by the United States and the Kingdom. And that has gone on throughout this period. So these fundamentals that strengthen us, that bring us together, they're there. They remain strong. They'll be strengthened in the future. My job is to try to find ways to continue to emphasize them, work on them, and strengthen them. And I'm convinced that in a very short period of time, we'll get back to a full political relationship as well. And remember that the Prime Minister of Thailand has been to the United States recently, repeatedly, and has had conversations with my president. So we continue to talk to each other at every level, and we will.
But for the level of your meeting with our Foreign Minister Don Poromatvinai, it has become the issue among observers in Thailand. Could you tell me what actually happened during the meeting last month?
Yes. Well, here's what I'm not going to do, because it's diplomatic practice not to describe the content of private diplomatic meetings. So I'm not going to do that. We had a long meeting. It was a good meeting. I can talk about the atmospherics of it, talked about a number of different subjects, and then afterward we had a press conference. And what I did during that press conference, because it was, I think, the interest of the foreign minister and of the media, was I clarified the position of the United States on these matters that were of interest to the media. That's what happened. I know some people saw it as, some kind of a tussle or a fight. I didn't go to the foreign ministry that day seeking to create that impression. I have been in very close touch with the foreign ministry since then. So I don't think it will have a long-term effect on the relationship. I value very much the honesty of the foreign minister and of the ministries around town. They're very straight with me, very direct with me, and we have good, constructive conversations. So what happened there, is for you to judge in seeing what happened at the press conference.
Yes, for many observers and especially diplomat circles, they ask question that, or they raise the observation that perhaps you have, of course, you must be prepared in advance to have your own statement, your paper, and you read afterward, after the meeting with Foreign Minister Don Paramatvinay.
Right.
What's your take on that?
Well, it wasn't.
People say it's considered undiplomatic to do so.
Yeah. Well, it was not my intention to do that, but there seemed to be a degree of pressure that I clarify the views of the United States of America, and I thought, given the level of interest in the details, that I would provide the details of our policy. And they speak for themselves, what we had to say about that. My hope is that we can and will move on from that. I think we will. There's too much going on, too many important things that we need to talk about. So I'm not going to let that one incident or the reaction to it among some define how I operate as the United States ambassador here. And again, I value very much the relationship that I have with the minister and with all of the ministers of the government and with the prime minister.
Have you talked or discussed with Minister Don
Well,
after
he's
that?
been traveling a lot. I think he's in India now. He was most recently up in China at an ASEAN meeting. I've talked to his staff certainly since then, and I will. I hope to have an occasion to talk to him again soon.
And he said, you should try to understand Thailand better. You think you have understood Thailand better right now?
Well, I've been working on understanding Thailand for 9 months. Have enjoyed very much my travels around the country, meeting people here, but also from as far south as Songkhla and Nakhon Si Thammarat, all the way up to Chiang Mai, Chiang Rai, out to Khon Kaen, and many Jangwat provinces in between, probably about 26, 27 provinces. I try to talk to as many people as I can and understand what people are thinking, what the hopes and aspirations of the people of Thailand are. And I think that's my role, and to try to interpret that to Washington, but then also to speak honestly and straightforwardly, to reflect the views of my country here, in particular as they relate to fundamental values that we hold and that I think Thailand also has subscribed to, like freedom of the press, freedom of association, freedom of speech. We think these are important, and we think they're important not just in the abstract, but to make all democracies strong and to bring them together, to unify them, to reconcile them. And you have in Thailand coming up a very big, important decision, big moment with your referendum in early August. And we, of course, watch that very closely as a friend and ally of Thailand that wants Thailand to be strong and prosperous in the future. And we believe that these fundamental principles, these freedoms, are what makes countries unified, strong, and reconciled, and independent, and free, and prosperous in the future. And that's why we put the emphasis on their importance. For the 21st century, the countries that succeed, we believe, will be the countries that are working together.
Have your perception about Thailand, especially Thai politics and sentiment among Thai people, changed since you assumed your post?
I suppose so.
For the past 9 months?
I think so. I think my perception is that it's very complicated. Very
It's
complicated.
still complicated for you?
Pardon me?
Still complicated for you?
Oh, it's very complicated, as are politics in the United States. These things are very, very complex. And I think the only way you can begin to develop a sophisticated understanding is by talking to people and by getting to know them and by hearing their views and by trying to figure out, what is in the hearts and the minds of Thais going forward. And I spend a lot of my time talking to the members of the current government here and hearing their views, because after all, I am accredited to them They are my counterparts, and it's essential that I understand their views as well, and that they hear from me the views of the United States of America. So that process will go on. It will go on, and I'm certain that in the future, this relationship that's been strong for 10 generations will be strong in the future as well. And that's my job, to try to make that happen. And if I sometimes do things that people regard as, not good, I will try to get past that and move on and continue to try to strengthen this relationship as much as I can.
With the policy of the U.S. pivot to Asia, what's the main mission of the U.S.? Does the U.S. really have interest in Asia, or the main issue is to contain China?
Of course we have huge interests in Asia. We've got huge interests with China, which is why we work so hard with China on a broad range of issues. Our Secretary of State and other members of the cabinet were just in Beijing, speaking to Xi Jinping, speaking to the leadership there about everything, about foreign policy, whether we're talking about South China Sea or North Korea, we're talking about economic issues, because economically, China and the United States are intertwined, and that is true across Asia. America is a Pacific nation. We have always been, ever since we reached the Pacific coast. We have many, many Asian Americans who are citizens of the United States. We have economic and social and people-to-people interaction with Asia that is broad and deep. We are the largest investor in Southeast Asia. American investment in Southeast Asia is larger than China, Japan, South Korea put together. We have invested here. We believe in it. We believe that this part of the world is the future of the world. Young, dynamic, talented, with great resources, and that's why the United States of America is going to continue, I think regardless of who's president of the United States, continue to put a lot of emphasis on our relationships with ASEAN, with Thailand certainly, and with Asia as a whole.
But is it because the interest of the U.S. is also having so much in South China Sea issue as well, especially on your recent article in the newspaper in response to the Chinese ambassador?
Right. Well, the Chinese ambassador wrote an article, and I figured, okay, I should respond, so I responded. I wouldn't pick out any one issue. They're all important. South China Sea is an important issue, but that's not about the United States versus China. That's about, will the future be a future that is regulated by international rules of the road, understood laws and rules and agreements that we all are part of, transparent, or will it be a future that is determined by the unilateral actions of certain actors? We believe in freedom of the seas, we believe in the international process, and we believe that these disputes between claimants in the South China Sea, and we are not one, and Thailand is not one, but China is engaged, the Philippines is engaged, Indonesia, Malaysia, Vietnam, others are engaged. We believe that these should be worked out through international law and taken seriously that way. And we believe in ASEAN centrality. We believe ASEAN has a voice in this and should be free to express it.
Don't you think that perhaps South China Sea issue or ASEAN would be more peaceful without the United States coming in to try to make a stance on the issue, because you are not a claimant state on South China Sea?
We're not making a stance on the South China Sea issue except for one thing, which is we believe that international waters and airspace should remain that way until we go through a process that is understood by all the parties and agreed to by all the parties of arbitrating or working through the geographic disputes that exist among the claimant states. That's our interest in it. So we're not trying to pick a fight with China. In fact, what we're trying to do is seek a peaceful solution to this. And we think the peaceful solution to these differences among nations about who owns this and who owns that is not through one party creating new facts on the ground by reclaiming land and putting facilities on it. We think the solution to it is through the use of the international system and international agreements, and soon the UN Commission on the Law of the Sea will make a ruling about this one case between the Philippines and China, and we hope, we don't know what that ruling will be, but we hope that all parties can agree it should be respected.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Lynn Davies, for joining me.
Thank you very much. I've enjoyed it so much. Thank you very much.
ค่ะมุมมองของเอกอัครราชทูตสหรัฐอเมริกาประจำประเทศไทยท่านทูตกลินทาวเซนเดวิสนะคะยืนยันว่าไทยยังเป็นเพื่อนที่ดีของสหรัฐถึงแม้จะมีอุปสรรคเกิดขึ้นในหลาย ๆ ด้านรวมถึงมุมมองของสหรัฐต่อประเทศไทยในเรื่องของสิทธิมนุษยชนและประชาธิปไตยอย่างเป็นเรื่องที่สหรัฐอเมริกาจับตามองและให้ความสนใจเป็นอย่างมากทั้งหมดคือตอบโจทย์และที่นี่ไทย PBS สำหรับคืนนี้ดิฉันณัฐฐา โกมลวาทินสวัสดีค่ะ